Test 1, 2. Can you hear me now? I thought I had everything all set up and ready to go. And apparently, I did not plug the mic in. uh, oh my. Hopefully, it sounds like everybody can hear me now. Let me know how the volume is. I I've been kind of trying to adjust some things here and there in the office area, such as it is. Technically, this is supposed to be like a sitting room, I think. But I commandeered it for my office for work, and commandeered it for my. Can you hear me? If you can hear me, say yes. I just want to make sure it's coming through. A little louder would be better. Okay, hang on one second. Let me pop it up just a bit. How's this? I'm going to try not to talk any louder to compensate. Okay. So I bumped it up just a smidge. Let me know if that's good. Basically what I did is instead of having the mic in the way, since I like to use my hands when I talk, I moved it up here, hopefully out of range of the camera. So the last two videos that I recorded, one of which is not up yet, but the last one that I pushed up to the channel was recorded with it up here, and I felt like it did pretty well with that. But obviously live is a little bit different, so I just want to make sure you guys can hear me once I actually plug the microphone into the computer. That's also very helpful to get things working correctly. So maybe I need some more coffee. Hang on. Oh my goodness. All right. Well, if that craziness didn't get a like, then I don't know what's going to, because it's just going to all be downhill from there. So, welcome late to the Dev Mentor Dave live stream, the DeepPockets live stream, where we are going through the project, the DeepPockets project, community project, and we're kind of going through the process from start to finish. How are we going to think about the project? How are we going to plan the project out? And we're getting closer and closer and closer to actually writing code as a community and actually building this thing. And I know everybody has been waiting with bated breath for that reality since like February. So we are almost there. I think there's just some things along the way that we need to talk about, that we need to cover, and hopefully it's been helpful to you guys. I think it has in some ways. In some ways, it might just be reinforcing things that you already know, and that's okay. But I just want to make sure that that we're giving you as much information that's going to help you not only in the job, when you get a job, or if you're already working in a job, but also perhaps as a freelancer. Because one of the things that I'm noticing more and more is that junior devs especially are starting to kind of branch out, and this is a good thing. They're starting to kind of branch out a little bit and really look at other options for monetary gain as a junior developer. And so I want to try to equip you to be able to do some of those things, even if they may not be part of your actual job. When you get a job, if you get a job for a company, I want to be able to equip you to be able to do those things even on your own if necessary. So hopefully this is helpful to you, and not just a bunch of stuff that you already knew. So anyway, let's see. We are channel updates. We are getting very, very close to 3,000 subscribers. So if you're not subscribed, hit the subscribe button, click the bell icon so you're notified when we do go live. We typically go live on Saturday mornings, typically right now talking about the DeepPockets project, but we do sometimes do other live streams, and of course we'll put videos up throughout the week as well. Things have been a little bit crazy at the job lately, and just in life. I've got my oldest son is graduating from high school next Saturday, so lots of different things going on with that, and just ending school and all the fun things that happen around that process. So as I'm sure you are all aware, life gets crazy at times. So thank you for your patience. Thank you for kind of putting up with me and just assuming that I would be here, since I completely forgot to set anything up and tell anybody that I was going to be online. So thanks for joining me. Hopefully what we talk about today is going to be beneficial to you. It's kind of an extension of some of the things that we've talked about already, but I think it's important for us to dive into that. Anyway, so if you are watching live, if this is your first time, leave a comment in the chat and just tell us where you're watching from. If you're watching live, just say hi so people know that you're here and we can interact with you. I try to be as interactive as I can be. On these, I tend to do a little bit more talking about a specific topic, but I try to kind of keep my eye on the chat as well. So if you have a specific question for me, do at DevMentorDave, so the @ DevMentorDave, or just put like some question marks in front of your question. That way I can see those very quickly as I'm reading through, because otherwise I may not see it depending on how chatty everybody is this morning or this evening. As Idrinth was talking about, it's late afternoon for Idrinth right now, probably getting ready to eat some dinner. Speaking of Idrinth, just from my bed count, feeling lazy this evening. That works for me. You don't have to be on camera, so you can watch from wherever and participate from wherever, right? All right, so let me just look through here, see if I'm missing anything. Yeah, it's 5 o'clock where Idrinth is in Germany, 5 p.m. Or what is that, 1700 hours? Yes. Let's see. All right, so let's talk about timeline here, because I want to give you guys hopefully a fairly solid timeline for the next few weeks on the DeepPockets project. First of all, this week we're going to be talking about requirements gathering. We've talked about features in the past, and we talked a little bit about requirements gathering, but I want to give you a little bit more of a framework and kind of walk you through what I typically do when it comes to requirements gathering. And especially in my own personal projects now, we would do things a little bit differently from a corporate standpoint. And I have different jobs have done things different ways when it comes to requirements gathering. Sometimes I've been a part of it, sometimes I've not been a part of it. But I just want to kind of talk through how I typically do it when I'm doing a freelance project or something like this project that we're doing as a community. And so we're going to talk about that today, and we're going to talk a little bit about design today for the DeepPockets project. Maybe throw out some options. We might set up a poll and see what you guys are interested in. But I want to kind of walk through how I look at design, especially since I'm not a designer. Since I'm a developer, you don't want me designing things. I think I've said that before. I'm not a very creative person. I know what looks bad, but I can't tell you necessarily why it looks bad, just that it looks bad and to me. But I'm not really a designer. So we did throw out there if anybody wanted to take a stab at designing things. I didn't have anybody take me up on that, probably because design's a good bit of work. Nobody wants to offer that for free. And I'm not going to pay anybody. So, because I'm cheap, and this is a community project. So anyway, this week, that's what we're going to talk about, hopefully, if I can stop blabbering for the first 15 minutes. Then next week, we're going to look at the database schemas. I think I mentioned we were going to try to do that this week, but I felt like, I needed another week to look at some of the stuff that people have put up, and B, I wanted to just make sure that we cover some of these things, because some of these things might affect how you go about thinking about the database design. I have some thoughts on database design, but I want to hold off on that until next week. All right, so next week we'll talk about our final database design. I'll have that laid out based some off of what I've seen from other people, some of my own thoughts, and we'll kind of move forward from there. The week after that, so that would be, let's see, 18th. Actually, I take that back. We may not. I'll keep you guys posted. We might not have. I forgot about this. We might not have a live stream next week because that's Saturday's graduation. We might push it to Monday. I'll keep you guys posted. I might throw a poll up and see what people think if we just want to take a break or do it on a different day or something like that. But that is graduation day for us, so I might not be able to jump on live next Saturday. But I'll keep you guys posted and let you know what the plan is as far as that's concerned. But the next live stream that we have will be database structure. The next live stream after that will be walking through our project code structure. So a lot of you are unfamiliar with PHP, with Laravel, and you're kind of learning these things as we go, which is awesome. Sometimes you just have to do that. And so I'm going to have the whole project laid out in a repository, and we're going to take a Saturday morning live stream. We're going to walk through where everything is, kind of how it's laid out. It would be good if you would do some research on Laravel, some research on React. What are we using? Tailwind. Have some idea of names and things like that, of stuff that I'll be talking about. Try to be a little bit familiar with it before we do that. But you've got a couple of weeks before that happens. But we'll actually walk through the project structure. We might do a little bit of coding just so you guys can see how things work if you're unfamiliar with it. And then the week after that, we're going to talk about our initial tickets. So we're really only about 3-4 weeks away from coding. So we will be coding in June, maybe right before June. It kind of depends on what happens next week. So we are very close to having the project up in the repository. Once it's up in the repository, you'll have access to it. You can pull it down. Those of you who are part of the collaborators, if you're not a collaborator and you want to be a collaborator on the project, there is a form in the Dev Mentor Dave, what's it called? Discord server. There is a link to the form where you can send your GitHub username or your email address, and I'll get you added to the collaborators. You'll be able to pull that down and add, create branches and add your PRs and things like that. So, let's see. Yeah, sometimes we do that, Indrinth. The difference is we're actually not going to use a SPA for React. I'll walk through what we're going to do with that later. So we're not going to be using like Next.js. We're going to actually be using React in the Laravel application. So we're just going to have one repo for that. But yeah, a lot of times, especially if you're going to use a SPA, you'll split that up. SPA, for those that don't know, SPA is a single page application. So basically you have an application that's your front end and you have a separate application that's your back end. We will still do most of the interaction via APIs. And again, we'll talk about this when we talk through the structure. But yeah, so we'll probably just stick with one repo on that one, Idrinth. All right, CW says, Dev Mentor Dave, can we have a poll for the competency of our skill levels for each framework? I think we are diverse in our backgrounds. Maybe I'll take a look at that. I'll take a look at that and see what we want to do. I wasn't originally going to necessarily split people up on different parts of the project. We might do that a little bit later. I was going to kind of give people the opportunity to do whichever one they wanted. I wasn't going to assign it necessarily. So I'll think about it. I'll think about it. I don't know. I'll have to figure out how I want to do that, honestly. So we'll see. I'll keep you guys posted if we can do something like that, like a skills assessment type thing. Let's see. Not even using a spa there. 16 or so pages. I'm not sure what you're talking about, Idrinth. Let me know. Um, Ming says, so like microservices for the system design. No, it's not really going to be microservices. This will be a fairly monolithic application. So we're kind of getting into the weeds here. I'll talk about this more when we actually build it out. But basically, the React components will be part of the Laravel Blade components, Laravel Blade pages. So it won't be. It'll be really more what React was originally designed for, which was as a JavaScript package library, right, to be used within an HTML page. So we'll kind of take a step back and use it the way more it was originally designed, and not as its own kind of application. So not really microservices. It'll actually be much more monolithic structure there. So hopefully that answers your question. All right. Let's talk about requirements and design. Now, it's actually kind of funny. We had some training at work this week, and maybe this is why it's on my mind. I don't know. Around requirements gathering and how we're going to do things as a company, just kind of structuring things a little bit differently and changing the way that we do things. But that doesn't necessarily need to work the same way that it does as an individual or as a smaller team. Like I said before, I've worked in multiple companies, and all of them do it slightly different ways. Some have no process, and some have a very rigid process with lots of people involved, and it's a little bit crazy. But I wanted to kind of walk through my process, some of the things that I do personally when I'm gathering requirements, because I think it would be helpful for you guys to walk through a process and figure out what process works better for you. There is no perfect process, just like there's no perfect web development job or software development job. There's lots of different opportunities out there. You got to find what is best for you in the end. And so I think it's important that you hear a way of doing it, but realize that there's flexibility there. So you can kind of take things from this. You can go to ChatGPT and find out questions that it thinks you should ask or something like that, and kind of build your own process. But I wanted to walk through a process that's been pretty successful for me over the years, and just kind of talk about why I do the way that I do it, and hopefully help you in maybe some of your freelance opportunities or things like that. So when it comes to requirements gathering, I've seen it done a couple of different ways. One way, which I don't prefer, is to try to gather all the requirements you possibly can before the project starts. What this typically looks like is a lot of meetings early on. Sometimes companies will call this discovery, but really it's more requirements gathering, and it takes a lot of time to do it this way, and you've got to build that time into your project budget. And that's one of the things I don't necessarily like about it, is if you're trying to gather everything at the beginning, you're going to have to charge the client for a lot of meetings up front. And when the client's not getting anything other than just meetings and maybe some documentation, they don't like paying bills for just meetings and documentation. So that's not really my favorite approach. You typically end up with long, exhausting meetings where people oftentimes just kind of make decisions on the fly because they're tired of having meetings. And then sometimes later down the road, they're like, why did we make that decision? Well, this is what we decided in those, 30 hours of meetings that we had at the beginning of the project. And so I don't typically like that. There are some things that you do have to talk about right away in those requirements gatherings. And we talked about some of those initial questions in order to figure out what features we wanted early on in the project. But I want to kind of talk through how I would typically do this with a client, especially my own client, for my own projects. And so I don't usually sit down and talk through try to cover everything, the whole application at one time. I will get an overview of all the different features that they're probably wanting, just so I can start planning in my head two things. One, how long I think that's probably going to take, and then also so I can start figuring out what's the most important pieces, what's the first pieces that need to be in place. For example, if we're building an application that has users, user management's probably the most important thing to get in place. User management, authentication, more than likely they're going to log in some form or fashion. And so that's going to kind of be the central hub. And from there, users are probably going to interact with all kinds of different things. Now, that doesn't mean there's only one central hub. You might have users as a central hub, and then you might have some other thing like projects or something like that as a central hub. And maybe those users don't own projects. Maybe they're connected to them, but they don't own them. So they're not necessarily the only center of the project. And so knowing the overarching features and idea of the project is really important, because that lets you figure out what are those important central pieces. But at some point, you've got to get into the weeds. You've got to get into the details of all those different pieces. And so the way that I like to do that is, probably have a meeting that goes over kind of the overarching plan, overarching purpose of the application. But then I want to do kind of an as-you-go process. So we'll begin to break down the application generally by the user flow. That's how I like to do it. I like to do it based on the user flow. Now, sometimes you still have to build some back-end things in order for that user flow to actually work. But it's important for me to think about how the user is going to interact with this application. And that's usually a pretty easy way for the client to think through what is necessary as well. Because from a client perspective, they don't know how the code works generally. They don't necessarily understand design, but what they do understand, hopefully, is their problem and their process. They understand their business, they understand how they want to do work, and being able to walk through that process with them is going to help them find the things that maybe they haven't thought about, and help us ask questions that are going to kind of spur them on to think about things that they haven't thought about. And this is I've been doing this process pretty much since the very first application that I built for pay. I was working with my brother on a project, and it was a pretty big project. But at the end of the day, the organization wanted an application that they didn't have to just buy off the shelf and then force people to figure out how to learn. They wanted something that was custom, that would work the way that they wanted to do their job. And honestly, to me, that's really the best aspect about being a developer. If you can get on projects like that where you can build something specifically for people to work the way that they want to work. And so that's why, for me, walking through that user flow is extremely beneficial, because they are typically know how they want to do things. They just need to describe that to you so that you can build that. And so I typically start with a user flow, and I usually kind of break things down. First meeting will be something like, what's the first step that a user is going to do? Right? A user pulls up this application, and what are they going to do? They're going to log into the application. Well, maybe they're not going to log into the application. Maybe the first thing they're going to do is they're going to register. So now we've got questions right away. So we haven't even jumped into any features of the application, just user registration, right? So the user's going to register. So now we begin to ask very specific questions. When a user is registering on your application, what should they see? We're going to have a registration form. Do you want them to see anything else on the page? Should it be just the form? What fields do you want to collect inside that form for that user? This information is going to help you know what information about users you're going to have to put into your database. So that's why I kind of wanted to talk about this before we talk about database structure, because as you begin to walk through some of the details of this project, then you're going to open up more information than you might have thought you had. Or you might end up going a different direction from your database structure than you originally planned, because now all of a sudden the client wants to collect certain information about the user that you never even thought about or thought was necessary. Plus, it gives you an opportunity to ask them, well, why do you want to collect that information? Because they may have ideas of what they want to do with that information down the road that doesn't fit in with anything that you were planning on building for this project. So one of the things that we have to be careful about in projects is something called scope creep. And if you're not familiar with that, basically the scope is everything that's included in what we're planning to do for this project. That's the scope of the project. Inevitably, as you work with clients, there will be scope creep. They will want to add things or change things in what you had planned for the project, and you have to figure out how you're going to manage that, whether you're going to let them do that or whether you're going to interact with them in such a way so that they understand what that's going to change in the scope, or charge more for it. It might be a cost difference. It's going to definitely be a change in the timeline, probably. So scope creep happens every project I've ever worked on, every single one. It always happens. Well, it tries to happen. It doesn't always make it into the project, but scope creep tries to happen on pretty much every project, because again, even with this process of going kind of feature by feature, piece by piece, and getting the requirements, there's just stuff people that forget. There's stuff people don't think about. And so it's really important as you walk through this to try to cover as much as you can, but keep it limited to just one aspect. If somebody starts talking about user registration and they're mentioning 10 different fields they want in the user registration, that's a big user registration. Maybe that's more profile stuff, right? So you might be able to advise them, hey, from a user interaction standpoint, that's a lot of information to put in just to create an account, right? So we have opportunities to be consultants at that point. But you might hear about information that you didn't know was going to be part of this application. That's a good opportunity to ask questions. What are you going to do with this information? This doesn't seem to fit with the application that we've been talking about. Are there more features that you want this application to do, more functionality that we haven't talked about already? So it opens the door so you can understand where the client's trying to go. Because when they first come to you with an idea and even just talk about the first features, they're not going to give you all the information that you need to even list all the features or build your database. That's why somebody in the Discord channel mentioned the other day that it's an iterative process, right? It's going to change over time. You're going to have to try to do as much as you can to make it flexible, but you're going to be changing some of your plans throughout the process of the project. That's just the reality, because we find out more information, and requirements gathering is typically the way that we do that. And so as we go through, I try to walk through that user flow. All right, so we've got user registration that gives us an opportunity to be an advisor, to be a counselor to the client, and kind of direct them in a better way, direct them in a more user-friendly way sometimes than they think. But it also opens up our eyes to more information a lot of times that the client may not have divulged originally. So some questions that I ask. Let me check the chat here and see if I miss anything. Nothing important. All right. No questions, I should say. All of your chats are important, but nothing for me. All right. So so questions that I like to ask. I mentioned one of them already. When you go to this page, or when you access this view, what do you want to see? All right, and that's really, really important, especially when you get into more complicated pages, right? Let's say you log into the application. All right, so we've gone through login. What's the first page that you want to see? Now, for our budgeting software, maybe the first page that we want to see is our current budget, right? We might want to see our current budget with all the line items and all of the how much we've spent out of that line item or something like that. Or maybe I, as the client, want to see more of a dashboard view. I want to see widgets that are not necessarily my budget. Maybe I want to be able to go to my budget, but what I really want to see is a dashboard with some key performance indicators or KPIs, right? I want to see some information that just lets me know, hey, your balance is probably low, or you've overspent on these 3 items already in this month, things like that. So that depends on the client. And so we need to think about that user flow. And based on the user flow, we might develop that dashboard right away. More than likely, though, because that dashboard is going to rely on a bunch of information, that dashboard, we may talk about it, but we may set that aside and say, you know what, we'll come back to that, and we'll talk about how that should work later. We're gonna make notes about that. We're gonna document, hey, we need to come back and talk about this. But just because that's the first thing they want to see in the user flow doesn't mean it's the most important thing for you to work on. Again, that's why we have an overarching meeting with them to kind of get an idea of all the features that they want, so that we can figure out what the central pieces are. And then we get an idea of the user flow so that we can think through how the user is going to interact with this. All right, so let's say they want dashboards. We're going to set that aside. The next thing they want to be able to do is they want to have a menu, right, that gives them access to dashboard, to budgets, to what else? Notifications, so all these different things. So the first thing that we ask them is, what do you want to see in that menu? What pieces of the application do you want to be able to access from that menu? All right, so we're asking them what they want to see. That helps us start to think about our design and what that design layout should look like. And then it tells us what they want to do typically. So in a menu, obviously we know that's going to go from there to someplace else. So that when they click on those items, they're going to want to be taken to the budget page, or they're going to want to be taken to a list of notifications, or they want to be taken to their expense management, or whatever parts of the application they want to see in that menu. So that's going to help us understand visually maybe how we want to design it. It's going to help us understand how they want to interact with it. Another question that you might ask is, what do you want that to do? So what do you want the user to be able to do on this page? So let's say we go to the budget page, right? And our budget page, the client says, I want to be able to see the current budget, and I want to be able to add a new budget or copy the current budget, right? And so this is where we start talking about, what do you want to do? So we want to see the budget. We're going to talk about, what should that look like? Do you want to see a table? Do you want to see cards? How do you envision seeing the information on this page? And that's gonna help us create our design. Now, hopefully we have a designer to do that. But if we're doing it on our own, we can make notes about all these pieces of information. It helps us make the design really the way that they want it, just by talking through what they want to see. Now, obviously, clients don't necessarily know what they want until they see it. Or until they see something close. And so there are going to be times where we'll have to create designs. We're not going to do that so much. I will create designs for the tickets, but since I'm the client, I'll just kind of do that on my own. But this is where you're going to gather those requirements so that you can hand that information to a designer, and that designer can then design something that hopefully looks really close to what the client wants. And you have the information to know, okay, when the client views this page, they want to see the budget. Obviously, there's going to be a button to be able to duplicate. There's going to be a button to create a new one. So we're starting to talk through actions. And as we're talking through actions, that lets us know what things we need to build, right? So we need to build a budget view. We need to build those two buttons. We need to build CRUD, right? If you're not familiar with CRUD, it stands for create, read, update, and delete. So we need to be able to create, read, update, and delete budgets. And so we're starting to really get to where we're adding lots of details about what exactly we're going to build. Because here's the thing, especially when you're writing tickets for junior developers. Last week we talked about ticket writing, and we talked about the need to put details in there. Part of that is the design, and making sure that the design is detailed enough that it really helps you understand what it should look like. But part of that is the functionality. So if I say, hey, we need to build on the back end, we need the CRUD, we need an API that creates, reads, and updates and deletes for budgets, right? All of this information, the more we talk about it, maybe the client says, you know what, I don't want anybody to ever delete a budget because that's really important. I want to make sure that it's always there. Well, that's a very important thing to note, because then there's that we don't need to write anything to delete budgets because we don't need that functionality. So we want to walk through all the different things that a client wants to do, and typically we'll take that section by section, try to figure out what's the most important things, what things you need to do first. That's where building those relationships that we've talked about and understanding those relationships between different pieces of data is really important. So you can figure out what's that central piece that we need to build first. And maybe you talk through several pieces of the workflow really quickly and we set them aside just like we did with the dashboards until we get to that main point, and then we really dive in and we say, okay, the first thing that we're going to build is this budget piece. And let's talk about all the pieces that are part of that, everything that needs to be involved when you create a budget. Okay, let's talk about creating a budget. We're going to click the button and it's going to open a new budget form. What's the pieces of information that you want in that budget form? All right. What needs to be connected to the budget? We have budget line items. We have maybe categories for the line items. These are all things that we've sort of talked about, but it's really important that you actually talk through those things with the client and not just do that on your own. See, so far in this project, I've had you guys just try to think about things on your own. I've had you try to figure out what makes the most sense to you in building this project. But at the end of the day, we have to remember we're actually building projects not for us, we're building projects for a client. And so we need to go through the process and really figure out in detail how they want that to look. And I'll be honest with you, most clients don't want to do that. They don't want to sit here and talk about all the nitty-gritty details. And that's one of the reasons why I try to do this in small sections, in meetings as we go through the project. So maybe we talk through budgets at the beginning and building budgets, right? And then as the team is developing that, usually I will, as a lead, I'll come back and say, okay, let's talk about the next piece. And obviously we'll show you work that we're getting done with budgets, but let's talk about the next piece so we have the information and we can keep the project flowing. But it's really important to break that down into small pieces, especially for the client, because it keeps meetings short. It keeps them engaged as they see things being built. They're typically much more active in wanting to give feedback and wanting to give their opinion on how things should work. And so breaking those things down and having shorter meetings but more specific meetings allows you to kind of lure them in to the process of being really specific and eventually really giving you exactly what you need to build the project out. All right, let's see. I've got a couple things here. Idrin says, I'd highly recommend trying to nail down the problems first. So typically you would talk about the problems in that very first meeting, right? Because you need to know why you're building what you're building. I think we talked about this before. You might go back and check. I'd have to see which live stream it was. But we kind of talked about this early on. And that first meeting, once you've decided that you're actually going to work together, so you're kind of your first overarching requirements meeting, absolutely should include that question. What are the pain points that you're trying to fix? What processes are you trying to fix? Basically, what's your problem, right? Without being mean like that. What's your problem? No. What's the issue that you're trying to fix? Because at the end of the day, that's what we do. We build software to fix problems. So absolutely, you definitely want your first meeting with them is going to be that overarching goal, right? That overarching concept of what is it that you want to do? What is your goal? What is your purpose in bringing me on board? Now, I might be coming on board to fix current software, so I'm jumping into legacy code, existing code. And so the project that I'm on may not be a greenfield project like we're doing, starting from scratch. It might be jumping into something that exists and fixing an issue, right? But if we're creating a new project, the question is why are we creating a new project? What's the problem with your current one, and how can we fix that moving forward? So absolutely, Idrinth, you definitely want to talk about the problems. That should be like overarching first discussion. Absolutely. Mel says, will we be building a prototype? Basically we're building a prototype as the project. So no, like, I don't know if you're talking about like a working visual prototype. I'm not planning on doing that. The tickets will have a design. It's not going to be pretty because I'm not a designer, but the tickets will have a design on them to give you direction. And we'll talk about that here in a minute, actually. But no, we're not going to do like any sort of like interactive design prototype or anything like that. We'll just build based off of tickets and off of designs for that. So, good morning, Clayton. Good to see you. Let's see. I don't know how to pronounce this. Mazakaral? I'll just call you Maz. How's that? Welcome, Maz. Good morning. I am answering questions. We'll do that in the second hour of the live stream. I'm answering questions specifically about what we're talking about right now, which is requirements gathering and some design stuff for the project. But I will answer questions afterward for sure. Idrin says also the designer and the dev should make sure that the design is not adding too much overhead. Absolutely. And we're going to get to design here in a second. So I'll hopefully try to remember to cover this again, but the designer should go off of the requirements. And if they have ideas, then they should share them before designing them. Typically that unless you are designing while you're actually talking about it, you don't want to just add things in because you think they're cool, or add things in because you think it's a better way of doing something, because that may not, that all that needs to be approved by the client. The client needs to be on board with any design decisions, and design is going to highly influence oftentimes the actions, the functionality of the application. So you definitely want to make sure that the designer and the developers are on the same page, but more importantly, that they're on the same page with the client, and so the client has approved everything. Absolutely. Let's see. CW says, I feel like clients don't usually know what they want, but they really know what they don't want. That's 100% true. 100% true. Clients, even when they think they know what they want, they don't know what they want. I've worked with some really awesome clients that come into the project with a plan and with a goal, and even with like a timeline and things all worked out. And as we begin to talk to them, as we begin to go through this process of requirements and fleshing out all the different pieces that are going to be part of this. Sometimes the designer comes up with ideas, like we just said. Sometimes I come up with ideas, and we talk through those, and we have to say, hey, is this what you're thinking? Or is this a better way to do things? Sometimes we're just a consultant at that point. We're saying, hey, does that process make the most sense? Is there a better way to do this, especially if we're adding in software? Is a better way to handle this so you don't have to do things in quite the manual way that you're talking about doing it? So, yeah, almost every client I have ever worked for didn't know exactly what they wanted and ended up taking a good amount of advice and consultation from us as a development team, or me as a developer, or from the designer. So clients very much don't usually know exactly what they want. And again, that's important for us, going way back to the beginning of this process that we've been going through. This is why it's important for us to try to understand their industry. It's important for us to try to understand their business, their problems, their workflow. We need to try to understand as much as we can, as if we are part of their company, so that we can be those counselors, so that we can be those consultants, those advisors, to help them find better solutions for what they're trying to do. And at the end of the day, if we do that, then they typically will come back. If we're successful in helping them solve a problem, and they have another problem in the future, there's a high chance they're going to come back to us and we'll have repeat customers. So we definitely want to walk through that process. Absolutely. Yeah, Ming says CRUD is absolutely fundamental to full stack development. It basically, I would say, for most software applications that I've worked on, I would say 80% of it is CRUD. 80% of it is creating the UI and the database and the backend APIs for CRUD, for creating things, for seeing them either in list form or in detail form, for updating the information, and for deleting it. Like, that is probably 80% of what we do as developers. Now, the question is, the other 20% or 25% or whatever that looks like, that's where we really earn our money, right? That's where we are the consultants. That's where we find the right ways to do things. That's where things get complicated, when we start manipulating data before we send it back to the front end, before we start doing calculations on the back end, and all kinds of other things. But the vast majority of software development is CRUD. It's visualizing things, putting it in the database, updating it in the database, pulling it back out, deleting it from the database. Like, that's most of what we do. And those of you who might be afraid of AI, that's going to be the part that AI will be able to take over first. But even that, you're going to have to feed it so much information. I don't want to get into that, but I'm not worried about AI. AI will be a great tool, but it's not going to take developer jobs. It'll make us work more efficiently. That's about it. All right. So let's see. CW says choosing a good client is 80% of the project success. That is true. That is true. I must say, most of the clients I've worked for have been pretty good clients. I've had a few clients that were not great, and those projects did not end well. But most of the clients that I've worked with have been pretty successful and have been good clients. So hopefully there's more good clients out there than there are bad clients. And part of that problem is, again, going back to the fact that clients don't know what they want. They often don't really understand the difficulty of how that works, of how programming works, and the time that it actually takes to do it well. And so when you start going down the road, if they're not prepared for the timeline, or they're not prepared for the cost that it's going to be, what could have been a good client can sometimes turn into a bad client simply due to lack of knowledge. So it's important that we do our best to educate them, that we do our best to estimate how long and how much things are going to cost. We have a responsibility in that, to try to help them know as much as they can going into the project. But at the end of the day, some clients are really good about being ready for that, and some clients are not. And so that, to me, that is often been the deciding factor between what we would call a good client and a bad client. Idrin says, I can ask if any designer I know is interested in joining. If you're interested, got a couple of my contacts. Yeah, I have a few too. I kind of just threw it out there on the live stream. If anybody wanted to help us out, to hit me up, certainly feel free. If you know somebody who's a designer who might have some cycles and be willing to give us some designs, we'll talk about design here in a minute. But yeah, so I'm certainly still open to that if anybody wants to jump in and help us from a design standpoint. So certainly feel free to send them in. Yeah, I mean, code quality is pretty bad for AI right now. It will improve over time, but there's still always going to have to be some sort of human interaction just to even get it started. And so I'm not worried about it. Ming also says the best client I had was he gave me every single detail of the website, including design. Every part was well displayed. Yeah, sometimes clients have their own designers. Sometimes they come with a lot of information. I think even if they do that, though, it's still important to, if they give you documentation, it's important to walk through that documentation of the process and still go through some of these questions, right? I see the designs. Are you sure this is what you want to see? Just, and because you might look at the designs and be like, well, what about this? Should we add this that they didn't think about? So you still want to go through this process of requirements gathering. Even if they give you great documentation that includes requirements, go through that with them on a piece by piece basis and make sure that you understand those requirements. Make sure that they understand those requirements, and that you have all the information you need to be able to do. You have all the information you need to be able to do that specific piece of the project for each piece of it, and make sure the designs that you've been given are things that you feel comfortable building. Early on in my career, my boss, I was working at an agency where we built websites, and most of the websites were internal websites for projects that we had as a company. But my boss, I almost said my wife, my boss had this idea. She saw a website that was really, really cool, and was using waypoints. If you don't know what those are, go look it up. But basically what happens is, as you scroll, things would move across the page. You've probably seen some of these designs. And so she called me into her office and she said, can we do this? And I said, maybe, because I'd never built anything like that before. I'd never done anything with motion, with CSS and JavaScript. It was all brand new. So I had to dig into the website and try to figure out how they were doing this, and I was able to figure it out. But we ended up not going that route because I was not in a place where I felt like that was something that I could do. And so you want to be careful when you're getting those designs, that you make sure that those designs and those ideas and those concepts are things that you think that you can actually build, and that you can do it in a timely manner to where it's not going to run over budget for the client. So that's one of the caveats I would say. If the client comes to you with all that information, make sure that you go through all of that information with them so that you know that you can do the job. Or if there's things that you don't think you can do, that you're open and honest with them about that process, so that they either change that or pull that out, or they maybe find somebody else to do that piece. Obviously, hopefully you don't lose the contract, but it's really important that you know that you can deliver on what you're saying you're going to do. And so if they come to you with all that information, you definitely want to go through that with them for sure. Don't forget, if you are here, if this is your first time, say hello, and let us know where you're watching from. Also, if you have a question specifically for me, write at DevMentorDave, or put some question marks in front of the chat, just so I can see that a little bit easier, because we've got a lot more people chatting right now. It's a little bit harder for me to find stuff, and I don't want to just sit here and read everything live on the live stream. So let me know. I'm going to see if I can see anything that is obvious at the moment. All right. If I missed any questions, somebody ping me and let me know. All right. So these are some of the things. One more question that I would walk through, especially as I'm going through those designs, as I'm going through this process. What do you want to see? What do you want it to do? And then what else should happen, right? And this is where we get into some of the back end work that people don't often think about, right? So are there any calculations that need to take place? So on our budget app, when I put in a new expense, right? I just spent money on something. I put a new expense. Okay, what do I want to see? I want to see the expense form. I want to see these fields on the expense form. I want to be able to see that listed later on. But more importantly, when I click that button, what else should happen, right? That's the question. What else should happen? When I click that button, that expense should update both the budget line item. It should tell it, hey, this is how much was spent out of this budget. It should potentially update the balance of my account in the application if we're doing that. So there's actions that need to happen that are not user actions. There's not things that I'm doing. They're things that the application needs to do. And so we need to ask that question, not just what you want to see, not just what you want to do, but what else should happen when you're interacting with those things. And that could be things on the back end, like those calculations and updating other pieces of data. Or those could be things simply on the front end. Hey, when I click this button, I want to see this thing over here spin. You'd be surprised. I've actually had clients say things like that, right? And so it may be back end calculation things. It might be front end design things. When I close this modal, I want to see, this page updated. That's an important UI thing. Or should the page just reload? Typically we don't do that much these days. We don't reload pages as often because we've got all this wonderful JavaScript that we use for all of this stuff. But some people actually prefer a page load. It's really weird, but some people prefer a page load. Or they may not want it to update the list. Maybe after they click the exit button or they click the save button, they want to go to a completely different page. They want to see a completely different view, or they want to see like a new chart or something that pops up when they add that. Like so the flow of what they want to see, there may be things that are different than what we would just typically think of from a CRUD standpoint, right? We would typically think you save it and it updates this list, or it updates the current page. But there may be something else that they want to happen in that process that wouldn't be something that we would naturally think of. And so it's really important that we ask them not just what do you want to see, not just what you want to do, but what else needs to happen when you're interacting with this application, with this piece of the application. Because again, all those details are important to make sure that you're giving the client exactly what they want, and you're estimating things well enough to tell them, hey, I know you want to do this thing, but that's going to take this amount of time. It's going to cost this much. That wasn't really part of what we were thinking. Is that okay? Or should we cut that out? Maybe that's a phase 2 thing, a second project that we come back and we update the current application. Because again, clients, there's always going to be scope creep. And what you originally estimate is probably not going to be correct, because they're going to change their mind about things as they start using the application, or they're going to just come up with other ideas along the way. And that's just going to change the process. So, obviously there's lots of other questions that you could ask. For me, those are the main 3. And usually when I'm asking those 3 questions, we tend to get into the details of all those different components. And you can kind of take those 3 questions and break those down into every little piece of it and use those same 3 questions kind of as your framework for knowing everything about every granular detail as far down as you want to get. So those 3 questions really kind of are overarching questions that allow you to get to all the information that you need. Now, you're going to have other conversations, you're going to have other questions that pop into your head. I'm not saying that those are perfect questions or that the only questions, but those should help guide you into more questions, more conversations that you need to have to gather those requirements. All right, so that's typically how I go through a project in gathering requirements, and it's really, really important to do that, not just so that you know what to build, but so the client knows what to expect, and so that the designer knows what to design, right? So going through that process is really, really important. And again, that's not a perfect process. That's not the only way that you can do it or the only way that you should do it. Find a process that works best for you. But I feel like that's kind of some good overarching questions that help open opportunities for discussion to really build out the information that you need. And here's the last piece. Document everything. Document everything. Even the things that you think that you will remember, document it. There's 2 reasons why you document. The first reason to document is so that you remember everything that you've discussed, and so that you can build exactly what you've talked about, right? The second reason is so that the client knows what you've discussed and approves what you discussed. So typically what we'll do is we will write down everything that we've talked about. Usually we'll do some sort of design with that, and then we will present the design and the requirements for that piece of work to the client and get sign off from the client. This protects you as much as you can be protected from the client coming back and saying, hey, you didn't do things right. You want to get buy-in, you want to get sign off from your client on every step of the process. And the best way to do that is to document exactly what you plan to do. That also keeps you honest to make sure that you do what you said you're going to do, which you should. But it also gives opportunity if you are having trouble with something, or if something doesn't seem to work the way that you want it to, you can go back to the client and say, hey, this is what we agreed to. We're thinking it's going to be better to do to this, or we need to change it to this. Is that okay? And document those changes as well. So you need to go through this process, and it feels like, I know it probably feels like this is really arduous. It's really time consuming. It doesn't have to be. If you break this down, you can have a meeting every week, every couple of weeks with your client while you're doing the work for about an hour, and you can talk through a lot of these things. If it's broken down into different feature sets or different parts of a feature, you can break those down enough to just talk about the things that you need to talk about right now, and really flesh out those details. But you need to do that, and you need to document it so that you protect yourself, so that you protect the client, so that on both sides, everybody's happy at the end of the day with the work that is done and what was expected to be done. So gathering requirements is super important. I've been thinking about how we might give you guys an opportunity to practice this. I'm not sure how we would do that yet. I want to do something though along the way as we go through the process of actually building the application. I want to give an opportunity for you guys to interview me as the client and ask some of those questions, maybe about specific pieces. So we might do an extra live stream at some point, or maybe we'll just take a Saturday live stream and do that, and give people the opportunity to leave questions in the chat, or give me questions ahead of time as we talk through some of the pieces of the application, and kind of give you some of that interaction, some of that opportunity to try to help me as the client think through things that maybe I haven't thought about on the project so far. So we'll figure out what that looks like, and I'll let you guys know how we're going to do that in the days ahead. But I want you guys to get that experience, because it's a really important part of the process, having those conversations with the client. All right. Let's see if I'm missing anything here. Dev Mentor Dave, what makes a good dev versus a bad dev? When I'm building, I find myself Googling many things to know how to implement things. Does that make me bad dev because I don't know it all? No. I'm just going to say XViz. Hopefully that's the right way to pronounce that. I don't know. These handles, I tell you what. So XViz is asking, is it okay that I'm Googling? Yes. If you're not Googling, then you're probably not a good dev, because you're probably just either either assuming that you're doing things right and you're probably doing it wrong, or you're just spinning your wheels and you're not really learning and growing. I saw somebody on LinkedIn the other day say something about the fact that we need to get rid of this term self-taught dev, because at the end of the day, even if you get training to become a developer, you're going to be a self-taught dev. You have to be somebody that goes out, figures out what you don't know, and finds the answers and the solutions. That is part of being a dev. Now, the question about a good dev or a bad dev, I wouldn't say good or bad dev. I would say junior dev or senior dev, because to me that's really the main thing. A good or bad dev is more are you doing the right things? Are you going out and getting the help that you need? If you're not doing that, then you're a bad dev, because you're not improving yourself. You're not making yourself a better developer for yourself, for your employer or a future employer, for your team that might rely on you for certain things. So I would say you've got it backwards. You're a bad dev if you're not going out and improving yourself and finding answers to your questions. I will say this. Programming is one of those things that you remember more the things that you do, more than you remember the things that you read or that you learn. You typically learn more as a programmer by doing things. And so when you're developing, I tend to try to spend my time learning on the things that are going to help me do what I'm currently working on. But over time, you're going to see that you spend less time Googling crud, right? You spend less time Googling basic things and you're starting to Google more advanced things. And that would be the test that I would have for you, as far as are you a good dev or are you a bad dev, but rather, are you a junior dev or are you a senior dev? And the answer to that question is, what are you Googling? Are you Googling basic things? And why are you Googling basic things? Are you Googling blah, 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 blah. Sorry. Are you Googling basic things because you haven't spent as much time doing it? More than likely that's the case, because the more you do something, it's going to stick in your brain and you'll just start doing it naturally. So if you are spending a lot of time Googling stuff, that's not a bad thing. I would say make sure that you're Googling and then you're doing. All right. So you need to be spending a lot of time building things. The more you build, the more your Google is going to morph into more advanced things that you're Googling. And you can go to Google and look at your search history. Maybe use like a different account or something for your development, just so it's not stuck in with all of your other, things that you Google for life. But you could, over time, go look at the things that you've Googled in your search history, and you should be able to see a progression of things that you look at now and you're like, I don't know why I needed to know that. That's easy. And then later on, you see harder things that you may not even still remember exactly what that answer was. And let me just be honest with you. There's stuff that senior developers Google all the time. Regex. I'm sorry, but I just don't. I don't remember how regex works. I just don't need to. I can Google it, right? So there's some things that you just don't need to store in your brain, and learning what things you need to store and practice versus what things you can just go find when you need it or bookmark it or something like that. That doesn't make you a bad dev. It makes you an efficient dev, in my opinion. If you are, especially if you're saving things that you know you're going to need multiple times, that's being efficient. That's being a good dev. So you may be a junior dev because of what you're Googling, but the fact that you're Googling and finding answers to your questions makes you a good dev, not a bad dev. So good question though. Yeah, Mel makes a good point. Software moves so fast that much of what you learned 2 years ago is bad practice, or we just don't even do it that way, or it stopped working. Man, you might even be a language that never really took off, right? And so nobody uses it anymore, or a framework that stopped being supported or something like that. So yeah, absolutely. Here's a good question from Mel. How often do you stop to document what you've done? Is version control a type of documentation? I would not use version control for documentation. Um, for me, documentation happens when you're talking with the client. Now, if you need, there might be instances where you'd want to have documentation about how you integrated with a third-party application, right? So, for example, let's say you're integrating with something like Twilio. If you're not familiar with Twilio is a messaging uh, application that allows you to send like SMS messages. It allows you to make phone calls, things like that from your browser. And there are different ways that you can integrate with that. So you might make some documentation as you're developing for somebody in the future who might have to work with that code that you're developing. I'm not a big fan of comments in code. And this is the problem with all documentation, but especially with code documentation, is it gets stale really fast. People don't tend to update comments, even to-dos. I've had people leave to-do comments in code, and literally right under the to-do comment is the thing that needed to be done, that somebody had written the code for that and they'd not removed the to-do comment. So documentation, for me, documentation is more about making sure that we have written down what we're going to do, maybe why we're going to do it, so some information from the problems from the client. It's more about making sure that we have documentation for the client, more than it is leaving documentation for somebody else in the future. And here's why. This may sound mean, but a developer, we should be writing code in such a way that somebody can come in and read through that code and know what is happening. You should be writing code in such a way that it's readable, that it makes sense as you go through it. And that is a practice, that is a skill, that is something that you learn. And I'm sure, if anybody happens to get this far in the live stream, that somebody will disagree with me. Maybe I'll put it up as a quick post somewhere, so that I can give them the opportunity to tell me I'm stupid. But in my experience, obviously the better you get at writing code, the easier it is for you to read other people's code. But when you're coming into a project and people have written code that you've got to really focus, okay, this is calling that down here, and then it's going over to this file over here, and you're jumping all around trying to follow the flow. Some of that's naturally going to happen just because of, the way that we set up projects from a file standpoint, but the actual what they're reading should make sense as they're reading it. So like you should have naming conventions for your functions and for your variables that tell the user, that tell the next person, this is what I'm working with, right? This is what I'm doing. And so you need to write your code in such a way that you can read it. So that's why code comments to me are usually not helpful, because they grow stale and they don't get updated. And at the end of the day, if you're writing good code, you shouldn't need them, because somebody should be able to just read and see what you're doing. And and that's my opinion. I know that there are people that are going to disagree with me on that, but there you go. So documentation for me is really more about documenting for the client than it is documenting for future development, if that makes sense. Let me know if you have another question about that. But yeah, so when we're talking about documenting everything in requirements gathering, it's really more for that client interaction. It's really more to make sure that we're building what the client wants us to build and getting as granular as we can with the client. And again, as you're going through this process, the more you can help the client, the more they're starting to see you build the project as well. You definitely want to give them some sort of environment to see you doing work as you go. Then the more you do that, the more involved they tend to get. The more excited they tend to get about the project, and the more they're willing to jump in and have these conversations. So your first ones probably aren't going to be as good as some of your later ones, because they're going to start seeing work done. They're going to start interacting with it. They're going to start realizing, oh, I don't want it to do this. I want it to do something else. And so you're going to have those conversations more throughout the time of the project. So that's why, one of the reasons why I try to do that, not as one big monolithic set of meetings at the beginning, but all the way through the project and feature by feature, going through this process of asking them these 3 questions and just going down and finding the answers to all those questions more and more granular as you go. All right, I do want to talk about design real quick. Again, as Idris was mentioning earlier, if you know somebody who's a designer who you think might be interested in helping us out with this project, it would be a pro bono gig. Unfortunately, that means free. So I'm not looking to pay somebody to do this. In lieu of somebody doing that, I want to take a look real quick at some UI libraries that we might consider, and we might put this up for a vote as well. But I want to take a look at some component UI libraries here, if I can find this. All right, I just did a quick Google search, and these are a few, and I'm open to other suggestions as well. Keep in mind that we are using Tailwind and React on the front end. So if you're looking at other options, make sure that that's something that's going to be easily used for Tailwind and React. So obviously don't look at a Bootstrap library, because that's not Tailwind, right? So definitely Tailwind and React, especially if you can find one that's actually React specific components, that would be great. Obviously we can create components with Tailwind that are React components. It just takes a little bit more time to do that. But typically what I tend to do, especially if it's something that I'm designing and developing on my own, I will try to use component libraries like this, and try to use one component library as much as possible all the way through, just for consistency of design and things like that. But I want to just look at a few of these here, give you my thoughts on them, and then we can look at how we want to do this in the future. My assumption is we probably won't have a designer, so this will probably be the way that we go. Or if we have a designer, it would be nice for that designer to be able to work within the confines of a UI component library, just so it makes it easier for us to develop some of these things. Speed oftentimes is our enemy when it comes to developing applications, because clients don't have the budget to go very long. So the more we can kind of help ourselves along the way, the better oftentimes. So, all right, let's look at a few of these here. First one that pulled up here was Hyper UI. Now this is free, again, which is another selling point. Free selling point, free. This is something that is important for us, that it be free. I'll be honest with you, I'm not real impressed about Hyper UI. I understand it's free and open source, but I mean, just even the page is really blah. So I'm not a huge fan of what I'm seeing here. We could look at some of this stuff. This is actually okay. This, like, the design of their application looks, I don't like it at all, but like this I actually think looks decent. So I wish they would maybe they should use their own components for the actual component library. Maybe that's the problem. They're just, I don't know what the deal is, but like the components look a little bit better than the design of their actual website. So let's see, banners. Like this actually looks decent, you know, and they've got some ideas. Like I don't understand why they would why they it's just ugly. This stuff is ugly. You know, you look at some of these other ones that we're going to look at, the actual page itself looks really cool. It makes you want to use it. You got to dig in here to see the usage of these components, and what you can do with them. So I don't know. We'll see, but that's an option. Tailwind CSS components. This is another one. I kind of went, it's ugly. I'm not sure. Like, how do you design components that look good and then not have a well-designed page? I don't know. These components don't necessarily look that good to me, but that's an option. So this one is the official Tailwind UI, but we probably won't use this one because it's expensive. So to get access to this, it would be $300, and I'm sorry, but I'm not going to spend $300 on this Tailwind component. I don't see anything that's free. If somebody knows that there's a free option, see, there's pricing. There's packages. $800. What? Why would I need $800? Oh no, so team would be multiple people doing the actual design. So I would just be the one doing the design. I'm not paying $800, that's for sure. But yeah, so this would probably be the best thing. Something to keep in mind here is what it's designed for. So they actually have one for React specifically. So that would be great. Like this would probably be the best thing, but I'm not spending $300 on it. So I'm sorry. We're not going to use that one. Yeah, so the team one is for people who are actually going to use those elements for the design. But yeah, it would be, yeah, I wouldn't need the team one. Yeah, that's exactly why people are told to build components, because it's expensive. All right, so let's get away from the official one. Tailwind thinks a lot about their application, or about their stuff. So Flowbyte, this one does have a free option. I can't tell. It looks fairly limited though. Where's the thing? Come on. I went to pricing. Pricing. Here we go. Okay. So there's stuff that are not included. Like it's only got core UI components, right? What are the core UI components? Components. Okay, here's some of the core UI components. Let's see. Pretty basic stuff. That's kind of ugly, actually. That's cool. Those are better. Let's see. Clipboard. What is clipboard? It's a loading icon. Nope. Okay. Oh, copying. Interesting. Okay. Drawer. Right. So that might be an option. It looks like all of these components are available in the free version, so that might be okay. And again, Flowbyte, you go to their main page. There's some good design here as opposed to the hyper. I think I already. No, I didn't. The hyper one, whatever that one was, hyper UI. This actually looks like they use their components, so that's nice. The next one that I found, and I'm not opposed to other ones out there, so certainly feel free, maybe in the Discord channel, to leave me a comment and let me know of other ones that you might know about, other component libraries. I just want to find something that's probably going to make it easy for us to build things out along the way. Spend less time trying to build our own components and more time building the application, right? This one is free. They actually have a Patreon account that they use for support for this. And these are pretty good components. I'm kind of leaning this direction, but we could maybe do a vote or something like that too. So I'm not sold on it. And then obviously any other options that you guys come up with, but they're obviously using their components. It looks like um, they've got some specific components for different uses, like logins. You can see the different views. Well, it's pretty much the same. It looks like just the logo. Excuse me, just the logo's changing a little bit. That's funny. Um, Another thing to keep in mind when you're looking at these things is what does the documentation look like? So we've got some code that we could copy here. Oh, it looks like you can copy the code there specifically. We can do. It's got a dark mode. That's cool. People like dark mode. I don't really care either way, but some people do. Let's see if there's any other documentation on this. So one maybe downside for this. What is this? Oh, it's just more components. I thought it was like actual pricing for the thing. I thought this was free. This is just more components. Okay. So they've got some good design, layout, visualization things. This one's probably a little lax on documentation, from what I'm seeing. So that may not be as, what is this? Full page for you? Oh, okay. So that may not be really what we want, especially if we want good documentation. Coming back over here to the Flowbyte one, if we do something like, let's drop down, right? So we've got not only the code here, but we've got information of different options, some written information, kind of explanation of how you use things. So it's not just a copy the code type of thing. Now, a lot of it is, and that's one of the things you're going to see with component libraries is, hey, here's the component, copy this and tweak it, right? And that's fine, but I like to have any other documentation that I can to help explain things, because sometimes you look at stuff and it's just like, okay, that's how do I actually use that? What other options are there? Let's see if there's like an options. Okay, yeah. So like down here, we have like options and parameters to help us understand what those things do, right? So when we're looking at a component library, we want to find something that's going to give us this information. Either there aren't any options because it just is what it is, or if it's got options, it gives us a good layout of how those options get used. So we got options, we got methods here. So this looks like it might be a pretty good component library, even just kind of the basic free version of it. And they've got really good documentation. This one over here, the components look pretty good, but I'm not seeing, like, there's no documentation really outside of just the component information itself. So that's something that you want to look for when you're looking for component UI packages, right? And libraries, you want to be able to understand how to use this, and documentation is really, really important for that. So these are a few that I've looked at. I think the Tailwind has good documentation, if I remember correctly. But again, I'm not paying for that. So we're probably not going to use that unless somebody else wants to pay for it. But so probably scratch that one off, even though it looks nice. But here we do have a couple that look good. This one has some pretty good documentation that I think would be helpful. So I would lean towards the Flowbyte, but also open to other ideas, other options that you guys might have along the way. If you see anything, if you've used anything, let me know and we'll take a look at it. Maybe we'll put it up for a poll, for a vote in the future on that. So I just want to kind of walk through what I'm thinking from a design standpoint, because I will use whatever those components are, whatever component library we use, I will use that to help lay out the designs for the tickets as we create them, so you're able to have a visual of what that should look like in the future. So, okay. Let's see. I might have missed some things here. Mel says my first Google was what is H1 in an HTML, and the most recent one was 8-bit processor explained. See, there's some movement there. There's some graduation, some matriculation. Yeah, definitely looks bland, Ming. That other one. Let's see. Yeah, CW. Absolutely. We want to be paid, but we don't want to pay others. Yep, everybody wants everything for free. I'm actually not against paying for things. In fact, I do pay for things. I recently bought a license for the application that I use to interact with databases called Tables Plus. I just recently bought that because A, I wanted to support the person who's developing because I use it all the time. But B, it's a good product, and it gives me a lot of help in what I'm trying to do. So, and I wanted the extra features, and so there was a free version and a paid version, and I've gotten to a point now where the free version frustrates me, and I need the better version. So I went ahead and paid for it. If I were running this as a business and we were doing an actual application for a real client, typically I would include the cost of the library in the quote for the client, or in what I'm charging the client. So I would not be opposed to buying it on a real product, or for my company if it was something that we were going to use for real applications. This being more of a community project, that's really the main reason why I'm not paying. But we tend to try to be as cheap as possible and try to get people to pay us as much as possible. That's just good business, honestly. But yeah, so if it were a real project, I would pay the money to make things easier for me and for my team. But for what we're doing here, that's not worth it. I don't love you guys that much to pay for it. So you're just gonna have to stick with whatever we end up getting. Let's see. Da, 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 da. Let's see. I think this is a question for me. I can see where you're coming from now. I think it is a personal preference, but with take homes, should you add comments? I would only add comments for yourself, and then make sure you delete them. Typically for our company, we generally require a no comments policy when we push to the repository. So in our PRs, if somebody leaves a comment, it gets kicked back to them. So they have to remove the comments because for those reasons that I stated. So I would say comments are probably fine for you, but make sure you get rid of them when you're done with what you're doing, because theoretically the comment should be there to help you do something in the future, more of a to-do rather than information. If you're writing code that people can understand, you shouldn't need comments. And if you need comments to explain a flow, maybe you need to break that function down into more functions that are better named so you can see the flow in the calling of the functions. Maybe that's something that you need to do. Maybe it's something we can talk about at some point as we go through the project too. If I start seeing comments, maybe we'll look at that in our PR reviews. Let's see. Does documenting meetings with the client also help with contracts? Absolutely. Typically, so I don't recommend, especially junior developers, I don't recommend that most developers do a fixed cost project. Clients want a fixed cost project, and I understand why, because it's fixed costs. They know how much they're going to pay from the beginning. The reality is that almost no project I've ever worked on was worth the fixed cost. It always had more added to it. And whenever you do a fixed cost project, you have to define everything before you even get the client to sign off, if that makes sense. Like you've got to have so much detail or designs or things that you have to do so much work before you actually have an agreement. The only way that I would ever do a fixed cost project is if I had a discovery process before they agreed. So what does that look like? So I would say, okay, let's talk through your project. One second. I would say to the client, let's talk through your project. Here's what we're going to do. Hire me as a consultant. We're going to work through the project. Again, I don't like doing this way because it's trying to do everything at the beginning and that never works perfectly. But hire me as a consultant. And we're going to meet, X number of times. And in those times, we're going to go through and we're going to document everything that you want for this project. And at the end of that documentation process, obviously, I'm going to bill you for my time that it takes to go through that process. It's going to be a lot less than the time it would cost to build the project. So it's going to be expensive, right? Because it's my times that you're paying for. But I'm going to walk you through that process. And at the end of that interaction, you're going to be handed a full documentation of what you want to build. Now, that may or may not include designs. Designs would cost extra because I'd probably have to pay somebody to design something. It would make it longer, so it's going to cost extra. But if somebody wants a fixed price on the project, you have to have an agreement on what that's going to be. Now, if it's just like fixing bugs or something like that you could probably do like a fixed price thing. But if you're doing a full-blown project, fixed price doesn't make any sense unless you do a discovery phase before that, because you can't know as the developer whether you have all the information. They can't know that you're going to do everything that's necessary until you've documented everything that they need. And at the end of the day, you more than likely with a fixed price project, you're going to be frustrated because you won't make as much as you should have. You may even lose money because it'll take you longer than you thought it would. They're going to be frustrated because it'll probably still take longer than you thought it would. And you're going to lose interest in the project. Anytime you're building something and you're not being compensated for it anymore because you're behind, it's really hard to want to work on that. It's really hard to want to put up with a client being angry. There's just so many problems to a fixed price project. The only way to do it, in my opinion, is to have a separate paid discovery process. And even then, man, I don't know, because here's why you do that. They pay you for the discovery process, but then you give them your price to build all that out. And if you're going to do a fixed price, and if they don't like it, then they still have something for that time. They have something they can go to another firm or they can go to another developer and get a different bid. And that helps that next firm or developer know what they're trying to do. They may still try to get them to do a discovery phase too, but that's the only way that I would do that is document everything for a fixed price. But yes, back to the question, that is really important for the contract, not just for a fixed price contract, but for them understanding where their money is going as you're building the project. Because if you're doing time and materials for your project, then you're going to need to show them what was done, right, for every week or 2 weeks or whatever your sprints or phases are, right? Whatever your time frame is that you've given them, you're going to need to show them that they're getting what they're paying for. And so that documentation helps validate the contract, validate the work you've done. It helps them feel good about the contract, especially if it is an hourly contract. It makes them feel better about the money that they spent. I don't think clients ever feel good about the money they spend. Just like we don't feel good about buying things that we need to develop. But they'll feel better about it if you have good documentation that can show we've done exactly what we said we would do, and this is what you signed off on, and things like that. So contractually, yes, it does help very much. Um, I've heard of game companies that didn't define projects with the publisher and kept having things added. Yeah, that's exactly what you run into. And that allows you to, if they come back and be like, hey, we need to change this or add this, now you can have that conversation. Okay, that was not part of the original scope. This is how that's going to affect the timeline. And if it's a fixed price project, you can be like, this is how much it's going to add to the price. If it's an hourly project, you can be like, this is how much time it's going to take to make this switch. And so they understand the cost ramifications of those changes. And sometimes they'll say, do it anyway. Sometimes they'll be like, oh, if it's going to cost that much, never mind. We'll just do it the way that we have it. That's usually the better thing, because then you don't have to refactor anything. Sometimes you have to refactor stuff. All right. Let's see. A bit like a carpenter that wants money for the table he built, but he gets upset when his wife buys a standing desk. Yep. We want money coming in, not going out. That's the name of the game, no matter who you are. Money coming in and not going out. All right. All right, so I know we went long talking about kind of some of the design stuff and the things around the actual project, but hopefully that was helpful and maybe gave you some ideas for your own projects, things that you can ask, maybe that user flow, maybe that concept of how to interact with the client to get the information that you need. Obviously, if you have any questions, you can leave them in the chat here. You can leave comments on the video later on when it gets posted as a video. And then I look at all the comments that YouTube tells me about. sometimes I'll go back through a video and see comments that I never saw before, that never popped up in YouTube. So hopefully I see your comment, and if I do, I will try to respond to that. But right now we'll just kind of jump into kind of a free-for-all for questions. If you have questions that you want to ask outside of the project or even having to do with project, feel free to ask those, and we'll take those here. Probably need to cut off here at noon, so I know we went quite a bit longer with the project, but we'll do probably about 15 minutes or so of questions here if you have any. So feel free to excuse me, sorry. It's been a long week. I need more coffee. Hang on. All right, so I'll try to answer as many as I can here in the live stream if you have any questions. So, all right, let's see. Here's one. Devminter Dave, since you're the client and the project manager, does this mean we can't say no to your scope creep? That's awesome. Very insightful, Mel. Very insightful. Not necessarily. Since I am the project manager and the client, I think we'll want to have some opportunities, like I mentioned earlier, for you guys to be able to interact with me as if I'm the client, since I am, on certain pieces of the project. So obviously, starting off, I'm going to define some things, but I think we're gonna do at least one live stream where you guys can ask questions as if you're the project manager, as if you're the lead dev trying to figure out what I want for this next piece. So I may not have any designs, and maybe somebody actually design it, so I don't design it. I don't know. We could try that. So I have some ideas of how I want to do that, and I'll explain that a little bit more as I flesh that out a little bit more. But so no, not on everything. There might be an opportunity for you guys to push back, and I would say this: always ask questions, even of your lead. Ask questions, because I've had times where I'm leading a project and I have an idea of how something should work, and then the developer comes back to me and says, "Yeah, but did you think about this? Or did you think about that? Or if we do it that way, we're gonna have to change this thing over here that I didn't think about, because I'm not perfect, right? And I don't know. Technically, I manage like 4 projects right now. I don't know all of the code bases for all this project absolutely perfectly, right? So I have a pretty good understanding of them, and I can read them because they write good code. But I don't. There's things that I'm just going to forget, or I'm not going to think about And so the developers even come back to me now and they say, hey, can we do something a different way? And so that might be something that I can just make a decision on, or I might have to talk to the client. But yeah, I mean, you should always ask questions, A, to make sure that you understand the ticket, and B, if you have what you think might be a better idea, give that to your lead so that they can either take it to the client or they can make a decision as to whether that is a good idea or not, and they can maybe even educate you if it's not a good idea, why that's not a good idea for that specific instance. So I would say you should always have the desire to make the application as good as possible and make it better. And so you should always be evaluating what you're doing before you do it to make sure that you are that you are building something well, and asking questions even internally to make sure that you're building something well. So yeah, I would absolutely welcome you guys pushing back on things or asking questions about things, even outside of that like dev client relationship thing that we're going to try to set up. Even just internally, ask those questions. Feel free to give some pushback. You may not always get the answer that you want, but it'll help you learn in that process what that looks like. So definitely have opportunities to say no, or more like, can we not? All right. Have you used Firebase before? Is the storage DB free? I have not used it. I've looked at it. I've had other people that I know that have used it. I think it's like AWS, like there's like a free tier for a certain period of time. Let me just look at it real fast. I know a lot of people like it, so there is pricing. Let's look at the pricing real fast. I'll share my screen. Spark plan, generous limits to get started, so there's no cost for the Spark plan. Let's see what's in here. Cloudflare Store, 1 gigabyte total. So that's probably the best answer to your question. Basically, you get like a gig free of data. So egress is like bandwidth. It's how much is being transferred. So you only get 10 gigabytes of transferred data size over the course of a month. All right. So if you're writing something that gets popular, that's probably going to go away pretty quickly. And anything above this stuff is going to be a plan, right? And so that's going to cost. Certain number of writes and reads to the database per day. So you might think about that too. You might not have big pieces of data, but if you're doing stuff a lot, then that could be a problem, and put you over this limit for the free. So they do typically have a free tier. Oh man, excuse me. Oh, yeah, you guys aren't boring me. It's just been some late nights. So they do have a free tier, but it is pretty limited depending on what you're doing with it. If you're just building your own apps for practice and things like that, free tier is probably fine. But if you're trying to build something that you then want to sell or try to get people to use in a more robust way, you're probably going to get kicked into some of these payment options. And that's going to be the way with most of these cloud providers. I don't want to do that. I was looking for pricing. Yeah, so that's going to be the way any of these cloud providers are going to do that. They're going to give you something for free to tease you, but it's if you're trying to actually use it as a business, as something you're going to sell, more than likely you're going to pop into that paid sector pretty quickly. At least from my experience, most of my experiences with AWS. I have done some with Azure and some with GCP. Is it GCP or GPC? GCP, Google Cloud. Yeah. Sorry. But I haven't done a lot with Firebase specifically, Ming. Yeah, yeah. If you don't think it's going to be that much, and it's only for like an individual, it's probably fine. You probably get away without any cost on that. Just remember, it is only a gig. It looks like there's so that's for the data. It looks like there's cloud storage for like files and things like that, up to 5 gigabytes. Um, but yeah, I mean, depending on how quickly they fill it up, it's probably going to be free for just a single individual working on that application. So yeah, absolutely. And like I said, I have other friends, other developers who have used this. They've been pretty happy with it for spinning up prototypes and things like that. So yeah, you can do that. She doesn't have that much data. Yeah, you would be surprised how quickly a gigabyte gets filled up these days, though. You know, it's kind of funny. I was looking at I was looking at some videos about some old hardware, and just looking at how much like the storage space was in megabytes, kilobytes even. I think originally, some of not originally, but I mean, you know, from my age earlier on, kilobytes and megabytes. Like, you can't build applications these days that are that small to do anything that we're trying to do. It's kind of we often don't really think about how much space our applications take just in the code base, let alone data and things like that we're doing. So um, yeah, it's crazy. Remember when RAM used to be in megabytes? Yeah, exactly. RAM used to be in megabytes. Now, if you don't have at least 16 gigs of 16 gigs of RAM, you're running slow. That's what my machine's 16 gigs. Pentium 4 256. Yep, absolutely. The P4 256. I think we had one of those actually, if I remember correctly. I think we had a Pentium 4. We had an Amiga 5000 growing up. I don't even know how much RAM that was. But yeah, in the old 3.5 inch and was it 5 inch floppies? I forget. I don't. We didn't really use the big ones. We had the three and a half inch floppies, or is it 3 1/4? I forget. Doesn't matter. Anyway, yeah. I am old. I am old. Are you talking about you? You're sounding old already. I am old. I can readily admit that. See this white and gray. I'm old. I did not ever use zip drives though. I never had anything that needed a zip drive, and so I never bought one. So we're old together. There you go. We're probably getting older the more we talk on this live stream. So anyway, 3.5, 5 1/4. Okay, that's. I thought it was. I thought one of them was a quarter. All right, cool. Yeah, 3.5, 5 1/4. Thanks for the research, David. Oh, and welcome. I didn't see you jump on earlier. So, did I miss anybody that popped in that said hi and I didn't say hello? Just want to make sure I'm not missing anybody. Oh, you did say hi earlier. Sorry, David. I missed you early on. I just jumped right over you. Um, oh, you knew it already because you're old. There's a lot of us old guys on here, old people, I should say. Anyway, yeah. It's in the sad thing is being old in this industry. It helps you learn things faster, I think, because you have more experience. But it changes your perspective, and you realize, you know what? I don't have to learn that thing, and I don't have to learn that thing, and I don't have to learn that thing because I know I'm probably never going to use it. But uh, all these young people these days, they feel like they gotta learn everything. So don't do that. Focus what you're doing. Mel says I love my Amiga. So many floppy disks. I think the big thing I remember from the Amiga, it had a good paint program. Um, and my dad actually used it and built some very basic like animations with it, which was cool. You could actually build frames in the animation, and then the other big thing is there was, I'm trying to, what was that called? There was a chess game. Is this it? This is it. Hang on, hang on, hang on. See if I can get a picture. Oh, that's really small. I'll just pull up the Wikipedia page. All right, so there was a video game called Battle Chess. I loved this game. I loved Battle Chess. Um, this looks like it was on the Atari too. But we played this. My dad and I would play this all the time. But it was really cool because you could just play like normal chess pieces, or you could play with these pieces here, and they had animations to them, and so like when you moved a piece, it would move, and there would sound like when you moved the pawns, it would be like ching, 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 ching. They'd go up to the next space, or if you're going two spaces, ching, 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 and so they'd have sound, and then so it was kind of a high pitch, and then the knights would kind of turn, and you'd hear like all their armor like shake, and they're like ka-chung, ka-chung, ka-chung. And then the rooks would all right, I'm getting a little crazy, but the rooks would like turn into these big like rock monsters, and they like wherever you put them. The bishops, I forget how they would walk really quietly. The bishops would walk really quietly, but then when they attacked, they would do like this little spinny thing with the whatever that pole is, and it would become a knife, and they'd like kill the person with it. I think the queen was like magic. She would like slap her hands or something, and whoever it was would just kind of like explode. Yeah, that was an awesome game. That was on. We had that on the Amiga. That's probably the thing that I remember the most about the Amiga. But yeah, I'm really not a very good chess player though. I'm better than my kids, but I don't play that often, and I'm not really that great. Battle chess. David, did you mention that before I even went there? That's funny if you did. That's awesome. We're so old. Black and white, 256, PS2, 3 half discs. That would be awesome if you still have that on disc. I think it's on Steam now, actually, is what I was looking at here. So I might have to get Steam and pull that up. Nostalgia. Dinosaurs. I've never played. Actually, there was an app that my kids played that was dinosaurs and chess. And the Amiga had an Addams Family game. That's funny. Yeah, I think that was the only game that we. No, there was one other game that we had on the Amiga, and I don't remember what it was now. Uh, I don't remember anything about it, but I remember we did have another game. But yeah, the old Amiga, all us old people. Well, um, we could sit here and reminisce for a long time probably, but I've got other things I need to do, and I don't see any other questions. So I'm gonna go ahead and sign off for today. Thanks for jumping on, everybody. Thanks for the questions. Looking forward to just a few more. I keep saying this, but just a few more weeks, and we'll actually be diving into code and actually writing code and working on the project for real. It'll be interesting to see once we get to that point if we get more people involved in the project that don't want to sit through the beginning stuff. So we'll see. But either way, thank you for hanging out with me, whether you're here for the knowledge transfer or whether you're here just to correct me when I'm wrong, or whether you're here just to hang out. It's been fun. I enjoy hanging out with you guys on Saturday morning. So as always, if you have any suggestions for the live stream, for videos, for things like that, don't forget to leave them in comment section in the Dev Mentor Dave Discord channel. I don't know why Discord is such a hard word for me to remember, but leave them there so that we can do that. I've got more that I'm working on. One that's already been videotaped, That's not even that tells you how old I am right there. One that's already been recorded that I need to edit for Monday, but more that I know I want to shoot, and then we'll obviously take suggestions and things like that. So troll me, yeah, I'm okay with trolling, especially if you're somebody who's usually in here and participating. I'm okay with you trolling me a little bit. Get the camcorder and the VHS out. Yep, absolutely. I'm definitely a VHS guy. Oh my goodness. Racing on a pool table? Oh man, that's funny. I don't remember that one. uh, yeah, absolutely. Good job, guys. And I appreciate you guys helping out. And again, I don't know everything. So if you guys know something I don't know, please share it with me and with everybody else. So we've got some people in here that definitely have some knowledge and experiences that I don't have because they're just as old as I am. So that's awesome. All right, we'll see you guys. Thanks for hanging out with me, and I will see you all. I'm not sure, depending on graduation stuff, we may not be able to do this next Saturday. I will make sure that we have an update for everybody once that decision's made, and then also probably Friday night just to remind everybody, unlike I didn't do last time. And so we'll keep that up to date for everybody. Make sure everybody's aware of what the plan is for next week. And if we need to do something different, like on a Monday night or something like that. I felt like that worked out pretty well. Mel, I do not like carrot cake. I do not like it, Sam. I am. That's funny. All right. Have a good weekend, guys. I will see you all whenever the next time I see you, and I'll see you on the next video that I upload, which will probably be Monday. And have a good weekend. So enjoy. Go outside and do something fun, because I'm not going to, because I don't like going outside. All right, I'll see you guys.